So my name is Rob Belcher. I am the lead at the St. Catharines Enterprise Center. And the St. Catharines Enterprise Center, we are part of the city of St. Catharines. We're within the economic development team. And what the Center does specifically is offer resources and guidance and programming in support of small businesses, quite often at the startup phase, but also for existing small businesses as well. So we do this through a series of workshops and webinars, through one-to-one meetings, through information requests, and just being available to the small business community to offer our support and resources and guidance. One of the ways we do that is through webinars just like this, where we have experts like Joe Jones from Symmetric join us and lead topics that are a little more advanced. And today we'll be talking about this will be the third in a series of 6 webinars on digital marketing and digital media. And I will post in the chat once I turn it over to Joe, a link to Joe's team's website and to link to our office and links to the upcoming webinars as well in this series. I recognize most of the names that are here as people that have been with us before, so I won't spend a lot of time making introduction. I think just about everybody that is here has heard the same introduction 2 weeks in a row, so I don't want to belabor the points. But Joe is an expert on digital marketing, is the owner, founder of Symmetric Productions. And Joe, I'd love to just turn it over to you to guide us through today's topic. Joe is very good with answering questions, so feel free to ask questions as you go. I'll keep an eye on the chat, keep an eye on the Q&A as well, and just let Joe know if there is anything. And there's some time at the end too. So Joe, welcome. Thanks again for being here with us today. I'm really looking forward to hearing today's topic. I've learned from you the past 2 weeks, and I look forward to learning some more today.
Well, thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. And yeah, happy to be here. This is our second time doing it in a row, so that's really good. And I recognize some of the names on here as well. I always find it helpful as I'm going through the presentation if people would kind of put their name and their business, what they're doing in the chat. That way, when I go in, kind of go through this presentation, if there's things that I can maybe personalize in the presentation, that would be, I think, more beneficial to you. So I could give some examples, maybe how SEO could relate to your business, for example. So, and it also gives you a chance to do some introduction with everyone, talk about, what you do, what kind of business you are involved with, and do some networking. So as Rob said, my name is Joe Jones, and I'm one of the co-founders of Symmetric. We are a web and graphics and marketing company. I started the company with my business partner just over 20 years now. So I've been in this field 20 years. A lot has changed. Websites have come a long way. Technology has come a long way. So it's kind of been really interesting to see how some of those things have changed and evolved over time. And so I'm going to touch on some of that today. And if there's specific questions as I go through the presentation, just put them in the Q in the A section there, and I'll do my best to answer them. So we'll get started here. And if you want to know more, we'll have some slides at the end that you can, there'll be a link where you can download those as well. So today's topic is SEO and you. So this question we get asked a lot. Everyone gets a website and they want to know how to be first on Google. They want to know how to get their rankings up. And to be honest, it's a difficult process when you're just starting. Usually companies that have great SEO have, put time in some way. They've invested their resources. They've invested in coming up with a strategic plan. They've been around for a while. They've, there's things that they have done over time to get good results. And so, what you're going to find is that it's in most cases going to be an ongoing thing with SEO that you're going to have to keep working at to get better results all the time. There's not really a quick fix to get you, first page ranking right off the bat. So I'm going to go through some of those things and keep that in mind as we're going through it. And we'll get through it. We'll answer some questions today. So SEO, what has changed? So when we first started, we talk about, how people used to do marketing. It was traditionally newspaper and print. You would get the paper in the mail. Some of us still do. I do. And you would get these articles and then there'd be ads to go along with it. And then radio kind of came on the scene, and radio was doing advertising and TV and all those things in Yellow Pages. And I remember Yellow Pages specifically because I remember seeing in the industry this huge shift. So you used to open up the Yellow Page phone book, and it would be, the biggest ad. So I remember seeing, law firm ads. They would have a 2-page ad, and it was kind of like this mentality, like the bigger they add, the more exposure you're going to get, the more business you're going to get. And so people fought to get these bigger ads, and they judged their return on their investment by how many calls they got, and because that was the only form. But then as the internet came along, we saw this Yellow Pages really scramble. They really tried to figure out how to, keep the hold of this marketing giant that they created and have that revenue. And so, their business model has definitely suffered a lot because no one looks at the Yellow Pages anymore. There are some that do, but even in the online version of the Yellow Pages, we don't see the same amount of traffic. And so Google kind of took a hold of that same scenario. And so what you're going to find over time is that you're going to see how Google has changed in its, process of, organizing and indexing websites to advertising, and that has all changed as well. So the problem that we have with a lot of the traditional mediums is that it wasn't always really specific to your audience. It was like, try to get the biggest ad. We hope people stumble across it. And they try to put people in categories. Newspapers, it was kind of a shot, just throwing it out there. Hopefully people read that page. And so even the measuring the success of those things was difficult. And there was a little accountability because you were just, the only metrics you had on your own was whether your business was busy or not. There was nothing to actually tell you this is how many people actually saw it, how many people looked at it, how many people took action. Those things weren't the same. So business owners a lot of times felt like they're putting out a lot of money into something that they really had no control or understanding if it was even working. So we go to digital now and things begin to change. Accountability becomes a little more out there, and people want to understand where their dollars being spent and how their advertising dollars working. So Google came along with SEO and created this algorithm where we want to help you get to the top, and this is the structure that you're going to do. So search engine optimization was kind of born. And then we had things like social media. How do you get found on social media? We had other types of marketing, such as email marketing and various, other platforms like YouTube and podcasts. And the problem was, well, these things were really specific and they were measurable and you could be accountable. So when we compared that to, the traditional methods, most businesses wanted to start seeing that data. They wanted to understand where their dollar was going. They were kind of tired of getting this yearly review from Yellow Pages and trying to figure out if it was actually worth it or not, and then trying to guess what their competition was going to do for another year. So with digital, it became way more transparent, a lot quicker to get those results and understand and move and adapt as your business changed. So Google is constantly changing how they're doing it. They're looking to be more, targeted with searches. They're experimenting with ads on the left, on the top, on the bottom. They're always experimenting to see how they can capture more audience and make their platform still the best. So the power of Google and SEO. So 93% of online experiences begin with the search engine. So when we're talking about going to a website, usually you type it into Google or you've clicked on a link somewhere and there's a different type of a search engine, whether it's a platform, but 93% of all online experiences begin with the search engine. 89.95% of all search engine market belongs to Google. So Google is really the king. When we're doing SEO, we do focus on some of the other engines like Yahoo and Bing and those ones, but really when you start focusing on Google, a lot of the other ones have to follow suit because they don't want to be left in the dark. Until someone actually comes up with a totally different way of doing this and it gets a hold, people are still going to focus and flock to Google. 67,000 Google searches are submitted every second, and 32.4 billion is spent on ads every year. Now that number, 32.4 billion, that number is constantly increasing. We're actually seeing that number increase right now because of COVID and everything that's happened. More people are investing into online advertising and marketing, and even getting their websites up to where they want them to be. So what is Google's job? Google's job is to provide users with a solution that most closely relates to their questions. So when we think about how people search, they usually search in the form of a question. So Google has adapted that and took a hold of that and understand that what their job is to provide answers. So even when you think about it, you don't know something, what do you say? Just Google it. So that their actual vision and their mission statement is to provide answers to people's questions. So this is key when you start thinking about your website and what type of content you want to offer. So why does it matter? So your website is basically your car, and your SEO ranking is your gas. You can have a beautiful car such as a Ferrari, but if you don't have any gas in it, then you're not going to go very far. And I tell this to our clients all the time, like it's great to have an awesome website, but if you do not put the marketing thought process into it or the marketing dollar into it, you're going to find that it's not going to perform the way you want it to. So when we're talking about websites and the online marketplace, what I usually tell people is that if you hire a salesperson, and when you hire that salesperson, you're going to invest into that person. You're going to train them. You're going to, give them resources. You're going to, send them to maybe seminars. You're going to do all these things to make sure that that salesperson can be efficient, because you want it to be, a successful return on the investment. You're paying that salesperson to generate leads, to generate sales, all those types of things. So in essence, your website over time should be one of your biggest salesperson. You should be investing into it. You have to do the same type of things that you would with a normal salesperson: train it, educate it, give it resources and tools, things to do the job. And your website needs to do the same thing. And that's what Google's vision is for websites. They don't want it to be like a brochure website that sits there. They want websites to be actively involved in producing and generating leads and content. So think about that process when you're talking about, your marketing strategy. What are you investing into your website currently? And then that can closely relate to the return on investment that you're seeing. So the real question is, how does Google rank websites? So this is one we get asked all the time. So there's a bunch of things we're going to go through. I'm not going to go into them super deep, but I'm going to give you a face level understanding of how it all works, because we could be here for a year trying to go through everything. But if you focus on the main things, then you'll do well. So basically, Google looks at, there's two types of things. Google ranks websites in a couple ways. One is organically, which is what we call search engine optimization. And that means when you search, we're not talking about ads that come up. We're talking about your website organically or naturally getting results, climbing that ladder and getting results. So Google looks at three main things. There's other things, there's honestly hundreds of things that Google looks at to help get you ranking. But the three core ones that we try to focus on is content, links, security and usability. So content means the content that actually resides on your website. Then the links, how many other websites link to you, and in some cases how your website links to other people, how you name those links and how you classify those links will also help. The security and usability of your website. So you could have all great content and links, but if your website is not up to par with security, maybe there's viruses, maybe you don't have proper things in place, it's not usable for a mobile user, then you're not going to get good ranking. So Google looks at those three main components first and then tries to give you some ranking. Google Ads is what we call a different way of getting ranking, and you can get ranking by buying placement. So we probably have all seen before when you're searching and those ads that come up, people are buying those, and what we call those cost per click. There's other methods of buying ads, but the most common one is cost per click, and they can be highly targeted. So how that works is you have a budget and you determine your budget and you pick your duration that you want your ads to run for, and you usually pay per click. So if no one clicks, you're not paying. The negative thing with it though is that the moment you run out of money, you have no more ads. With SEO, long term, you're going to pay into either time or you're paying someone to do your SEO, but you'll have a longer traction. So if you need to pause, you're still gaining momentum. You're putting that money back into your own product or service. So that's why traditionally SEO is a better form for growth over time, is because you're there for the long haul. The power of going organic. So 94% of organic website traffic comes from Google. 30% of all organic clicks go to the first result. So think of yourself when you're searching. When you search, which links are you clicking on? Probably the first few in the list is the ones that you're going to go after. 80% of users only look at organic results. So there's a lot of people, and they see the little tiny word that says ad beside it, they skim past it and go. They don't even click on the ad. 81% of people search online before making a large purchase. So this is the case for many of us, especially right now when we're doing a lot of curbside pickups. We're looking online before we make that purchase. I remember when the lockdown first started last year, I needed a dishwasher, and you couldn't go in and you couldn't go into a store and actually look for a dishwasher. So we had to do all of our research online. The other thing that was difficult was there was many of the stores, things were back ordered. So you were trying to look and determine features on the website to determine if this product is in stock or not. And so we made that purchase. We did all of our, research online. We checked everything out, and that's how we made the purchase. What we're going to find now, because of COVID and the lockdown, is that that strategy is probably going to become more normal to people. So people who may have never done that in the past, yes, they're still going to want to go into the store and maybe touch it and feel the product and look at it with, in real life. But you're going to find that a lot of people are going to want to do more of that research now, because now they're accustomed to it. So they're going to want to look at that product more online. They're going to want to get more details. They're going to be more informed, probably before they step in the store. And so, prior to that, a lot of people didn't have maybe the same understanding of what they could do, or maybe companies didn't even invest as much into their online product information as they are now. So we're going to see this industry change more, where there's going to need to be more information about products. We're going to see that people are going to want to take more time and understand that product, do their own research online, because now they're becoming comfortable with doing it. So we're going to see that probably increase. So we're going to see that number increase drastically over the next year or two. And we're going to see websites and industries totally change to meet this online demand. So how does Google find you? So Google looks at a website and it does a couple things. It sends out these, what we call bots, the web indexers that go out and they look at websites and they look at all the content. They look at those three main components that we talk about to try to give you rankings. So it discovers the website. So that's kind of like the first stage. It goes out and looking at the website. We used to have to submit our website to search engines before. Google has got rid of that, where they automatically go out and start indexing a site as soon as it's found. So if it goes out and your website doesn't meet those criteria, then it's got to come back and readjust and do it again. So this is the process where we talk about your website in SEO always being ongoing, because as you change things are going to happen with your website. Maybe you're going to have some broken links. Maybe you're going to add new content. Maybe you want something else to be featured. You're going to change the content around. So Google's always going back and reanalyzing the site. That's why when you look at any rankings on Google, you're going to find that some days your ranking may be higher and lower than it was previous, because Google has gone back and re-indexed that site. So they're constantly looking at sites, and that's why SEO is always ongoing. It's always changing. And you want that, because if you were talking about a news publication, for example, you wouldn't want content that is 3 weeks old. You want relevant content. So it's important that Google goes out and indexes sites frequently to make sure whatever they're providing to you is up to date as quickly as possible. So that kind of comes into the relevance. So when we talk about relevance, what we're looking for is how closely does the content on your website match what I just searched for. So if I want to be found for, painting in Niagara, then I need to make sure that I have the words painting in Niagara on my website somewhere. If I don't, I'm not going to be found for that, because there's no relevance to what I just searched for with the content on my website. So Google looks really closely at the content of your website and says, how relevant is the content that I just found on this website to what the user just typed into Google? If it's not relevant, Google will drop it and it won't put you up there. So if you're trying to be really local focused and target certain areas, you need to make sure that you have those words or those phrases in your website. So if you want to be found for, Niagara region, it's great to have the word Niagara, but you should probably try to put Niagara region in there. Or if you want to go after local cities in the Niagara region and you think people are going to search that way, then you need to make sure that you have some of those words within your content of your website. And then authority. So how much authority does your website have on the topic? So a lot of people assume that just by adding the word Niagara, 700 times in their website gives them more authority because it's in there more. That's not the case. When Google looks at authority, it looks at a bunch of things. It looks at how long your website's been around, talking about this topic. It looks at how many other websites link to you, because if other websites are linking to this page or this topic on your website, then that must be that must be some form of credibility, because these other companies are wanting to link to you. So when we're talking about authority, there's a bunch of things that go into making that page more authoritative. Those are the three main classification that Google looks at to how it ranks you. So when we're understanding keywords, there's a big difference between local keywords and what we call national searches. So when we're talking about that, Google is really trying to make most of our searches now automatically localized. They're using like your location to try to make your search local. So 95% of traffic that goes to a website is on the first page. So when we're thinking about that, and if I search the word pizza, for example, I don't want a pizza place to come up in New York City. I want the pizza place to come up that's right around me. I don't want one far away, because if it's relevant to me, I want that pizza to be delivered to me. So I don't want to see one from New York City. Now you can get around that by typing in New York City and pizza if that's what you're actually looking for. But Google has tried to short form that already. So if you type in pizza, in theory, it should try to give you pizza places that are near you. So Google is working really hard to make all of our searches more localized. So when we talk about competition on on the search engine, the problem that you run into is that you're not going to just compete with your competitors. So for example, if I type pizza, I may get pizza places, but I also may get pizza recipes, or I may get anyone else who uses the word pizza. So if you're in like a tourist area like Niagara, for example, you're not just competing with your competition in Niagara, you're also competing with anyone else who uses that phrase in Niagara. So a great example of that would be a wine tour. So if we're talking about a wine tour company, if you type wine, you're going to probably compete with different wine brands. You're going to compete with wineries. You're going to compete with people who have recipes or pairings of wines. And so there is a lot of competition. And then you add the word Niagara in there. So now we're localizing it more, but we're competing not just with my competitors. I'm competing with other people who share that phrase. So Google has worked really hard to try to make sure that our phrases now become more of our questions. And so we're getting away from maybe specific keywords, and Google wants to focus on what we call long tail keywords, which is more of a phrase type of a format. So Google wants us to focus on more naturally of how we communicate and ask questions. So those type of things are going to be relevant on our website. So when we go back to pizza here as an example, on the left-hand side, I did a little experiment and I searched for pizza in New York. And so what it did was it actually pulled up pizza places in New York. And then it pulled up websites that talk about where to get the best pizza slices in New York. So it gave me not necessarily a company. So it used a geographical area to try to deliver what it thought was what I was searching for. I was looking for a pizza, somewhere I could order pizza and eat pizza in New York City. And it gave me those businesses. And then it tried to give me other websites that related to what I was looking for. On the right-hand side, I just typed the word pizza. And because of my geographical location, it tried to give me localized businesses. So some of the struggle that you'll find is that when you search, we know that we want to be found for maybe the word pizza, but in reality, unless you're a pizza shop, people aren't going to search for you that way. They're going to realize that this is not what they're looking for. If I'm looking for pizza recipes, I'm not going to type pizza. I'm going to actually probably type pizza recipes. And if I want to find, ingredients for pizza, I would do that differently. So naturally, our brain is wired to search for more specific things. And so we find this experiment works really well with real estate agents, because a lot of real estate agents think that they want to be found for when you type real estate agent Niagara. Well, in reality, that's probably not how most people would search when they're looking for a real estate agent. They would have some other form of phrase that they would use to find a real estate agent. And so, understanding your client, your content, what you want to be found for is really critical in the first step of planning your SEO. Understanding what, type of phrases, what questions your customers ask you is kind of like the most critical aspect to make sure that you're getting found for the right thing. Because you could spend a lot of time and effort on optimizing your website, but you don't have the right phrases in place. And that's not what your users are searching for anyway. So when I did another experiment here with deck paint. So if I want to paint my deck and I'm looking for maybe paint for my deck. So I typed in deck paint here. So what it ended up doing was it ended up giving me some businesses that sold deck paint, but they were mostly ad based. Because I really wasn't specific. It didn't really understand what I was looking for. Deck paint. Well, you must be looking for a type of deck paint. I didn't say that I wanted to, places to buy deck paint or paint suppliers or whatever. And so it gave me some types of paint that I could buy online. And that's why it didn't pull up any businesses related here. On the right-hand side, I changed it and I actually typed in paint supply store St. Catharines. So when I did that, I actually got I got an ad, but then I got some businesses related to that category. And then I, saw those businesses from the Google map. So just to give us some clarification, the Google map here that we see on the right-hand side, this isn't tied directly to your SEO. This is what we call a business listing. So this is different than your website. When you build a website, we do attach your Google listing here, your business listing to your website, but they're different. You optimize them a little differently. You can, they're a different animal. They're not your website organic ranking. They're an actual business place that you apply for with Google and say, hey, I have a business. So this will work if you're searching actually for a specific company, but it may not work if your customers are actually searching for a question. And so that's why you need both. You can't just do the one because one is business related, just finding the business, but it's not going to be able to capture every question that everyone has. And so the map, how it works is when it looks at your geographical location again, and it tries to match up a business that is close to you based on your geographical location. So keys to key website tools for your SEO. So there's some things that we tell our clients that you need to focus on all the time. So blogs is a great one. When I tell customers that they need to blog, I usually see their facial expression change, and they feel this daunting task of, oh great, I have to go write all these blogs now, and it's going to cause me all this extra work. But the blogging should be one of your formats, your main things that you do for your SEO. And the reason why is, from a statistical standpoint, companies that blog will generate 67% more leads than companies that don't. And the reason why is because when you blog, in theory, you're naturally doing a lot of the core things that Google requires for SEO. So what I mean by that is, when you blog, the best type of blogs to do is to poll your customers and say, okay, what type of questions do they ask me? Because we know how people search online. When people search online, they're going to do one or two things. They're either going to know about you and type you in. So they're going to type your company name right into Google, and then you're going to come up. Or they're going to have a question and they want the answer to come up, right? So when we talk about relevancy, when we go back to that slide and we think, how closely does the content on my website match what the user just searched for? So if those users or your customers are asking you that question in person, there's a really high chance that they're typing that identical question in online. So if you want some really good SEO, your content should be based off the questions that your customers ask you. Because now Google is going to say, wow, this content is really relevant to what this user has searched for. So there's a point for you. So if you can take a list of 12 questions and then write an answer in a blog format over the course of a year, now you have 12 articles that you can release, and you can release one a month. So by doing that, now we're doing the second thing that Google's looking at, and our website's kind of being active now. We're updating our website frequently. So we're doing that work all the time to keep our website relevant. So Google comes back, looks at your website, hey, there's more new content here. Let's give you some better ranking. So that blog becomes that. And then what you do is then you share that blog on social media. So you share that blog on Twitter, you share that blog on Facebook. Sometimes we just share it on Twitter, not for that people who are actually on Twitter, but we share it because we know that Google wants us to generate links. And then by you sharing it, we're hoping that other people will share it as well. So by sharing that blog, we're developing that strategy now of building links. And so if other people start linking to you and sharing that, you're also getting more links. So by doing that blog, you're becoming relevant. You're updating your website frequently. You have content that's relatable to users. You are optimizing those blogs relating to the topics that people are looking for. You're generating links by sharing them. So by doing that blog, you're doing a lot of the key foundational things that Google looks at for SEO. Now, you still need to do it on your other pages, but this becomes a good framework to keep building your SEO presence. So that's why blogs are so important. And SSL. So what this means is this is the security feature of the website. So when you go to a website, on the top left-hand corner, you're usually going to see a little lock there. That lock lets you know that this website is secure. So traditionally, we've seen that lock only when we've been buying products online. A couple of years back, Google stated that they want all websites, regardless if you're selling product or not online, to be secure, because they want to help users make sure that the experience they're getting online is secure, and there's not as much copyright, plagiarism going on with fake websites and things like that. So they wanted security to be in place. So that SSL certificate is really important. If your website doesn't meet, security, even from, there's errors on it, or there's viruses or things like that, you're going to find that you're going to have an issue and you're not going to get good ranking. And so Google has put that into the algorithm to make sure that every website is secure. Social media, like I said, sharing your social media posts online help. So a great example is sometimes if you go to search for a news article, you're going to notice that a Twitter post may come up. Google uses Twitter a lot to help generate and populate content, especially with news type of format. So social media, Google looks at social media to help provide indexing, to help understand what content's new, and to help understand a linking strategy. So using social media in your SEO strategy is important. The next one is responsiveness for mobile. So it's, everyone now pretty much has a smartphone that we're seeing from a business standpoint. And so mobile is really key. Google wants the exact same experience that you get on your website from a desktop to be translated onto a mobile environment. If your mobile environment is not up to par, maybe it takes forever for your pages to load, or some of the content doesn't function properly, or the buttons are way too small that you can't actually click on a mobile device, Google's not going to give you good ranking. Google actually has started making the shift now. What we're seeing now is that they look at your mobile version first in many cases to be the main primary factor for your Google ranking. So you may have been sitting on the fence and you have this beautiful desktop, but you have paid no attention to any of the mobile. Google is saying, okay, that shift is coming. We are now looking at what we call mobile first indexing, meaning that we're looking at your mobile version first, and that's what we're basing your SEO ranking on. And the reason why they're doing that is because more people are on their mobile devices. You think about a natural conversation. Maybe you're out at dinner, out for dinner with someone, and they talk about something. The first thing you do is you pick up your phone and you put it in there. And your experience then, your first experience is actually on a mobile device. Now, you may go home and actually buy the product on your desktop because you want to research it more. But many of the first time experiences that users are having are actually formed on the mobile device first. And so that's why Google is making that big shift from desktop to mobile to say, hey, more users are looking at the mobile version first. So we want to make sure that that mobile version is actually up to par. And that's what we're going to be basing a lot of our SEO strategy on. So a good practice for all of you would be to go back, look at some of your mobile things and say, okay, what can we do to improve our speed, maybe the functionality in our mobile? How is this experience going? And kind of do a little audit on your website to see where it's at. Other things that can come into play, and this is kind of just your maintenance of your SEO, bad or broken links. So when we're adding content all the time, it's inevitable that you're going to have some issues where things break. You've typed in a wrong link, or things aren't functioning the same way. So bad or broken links are a problem for Google, because when it sends out those bots, it looks at how it goes from page to page. So if that chain breaks, it can't go to the next page. So it can't continue indexing the rest of your site. So it just stops. So looking at bad or broken links on your website and make sure that they're all adjusted and fixed is something that you kind of just need to do all the time if you're adding content and updating your website. Improper redirects. So a lot of times when you build a new website, or you're changing how content is structured, what you'll find is that you may have an improper link. So this link that was here is no longer there and it's going somewhere else. So making sure that if you've put a new page in place and you're replacing it, that the new page is linking from the old page properly. So Google understands that this page is not broken. It's actually forwarded to the new page correctly. Duplicate content. So what I see this happen a lot is it's not so much on your website duplicating. Yes, that can be a factor if you're just copying and pasting the same content across your whole website. Google doesn't like that, so don't do that. Also, don't put in hidden content in the background. What I've seen a lot of people, what they do is they fill the background of their website with content, and then they make it the same color as the background, so you visually don't see it, but they think Google sees it. That's a bad practice. Don't do that. Google will actually penalize your website. So you have to do things properly. You can't really cheat the system. Google's worked really hard and spent tons of time on making their algorithm proper. So they've detected a lot of those things. So you can't really cheat it. You have to do it properly. So duplicate content. So Google looks at the original source as the source for that content. So you going and copying a blog and pasting on your website is not going to do anything for you. In some cases, it actually may hinder your result because Google recognizes you're not the original source of this content. So there's actually some websites out there that if you're worried about that, you can actually go to your website, type in that your website address on this. I think it's called Copyscape, for example. You can go to that website, put your website address in there, and it'll actually tell you if that content of yours is found anywhere else and where the original source was. So Google has content like that and tools like that they use when they're looking at a website. So the best form, if you really like that content, is to rewrite it in your own words. So you need to have at least 70 to 80% of that content on that page be original. So, or else it won't do anything for your SEO. And in many cases, it may hinder you. So Google wants to look at who's the primary, authentic source of this content. That's who we want to give ranking to. So don't try to go copy those things. It's not going to work for you. It's going to probably hinder you in the long run. So rewrite the content in your own words, find ways to make it yours if you really like it, and use that. Some other things you need to format is some of your H1 tags. So Google kind of looks at how a page is laid out for SEO to try to give you better ranking. It looks like the heading, your heading of your page, the title, the URL. It looks at some of these things to make sure that when you're going through the process that it's not just run on, it's relevant, it's proper. So for example, if you have a title that's, really, really long, it's not going to show up well on the Google search anyway. And Google's going to say, okay, we think that you're just trying to put all the keywords in your title. So it needs to be relevant. Google wants it to be authentic. And the URL length, you don't want, ones that are like, paragraph long in your website address. You want it to be concise and talk about the topic and what it is. And so that's looking at some of those things. When you do run any SEO tools, they will tell you what the appropriate length should be, how long, if your content is too short or too long, your H1 tags, are they identified properly? And so those just help Google understand what the page is all about. So an H1 tag, what that means is it's called a heading tag. So usually it's like your heading of the page. So usually you have your, about us, for example, and that's your H1, and then you have the content underneath that. So that's what an H1 tag. So Google uses those formats on those pages to understand what this page is about. So if your H1 tag is not relevant to your content, then it's not going to do really well for you. And so don't get trapped in, trying to make everything really catchy. You'll probably end up with better results if you focus in on relevant content than trying to be super catchy and creative. Google doesn't really understand the creative because it's not relevant to what the user searched for. So now you can be creative in some of your digital ads because that's where you're grabbing the attention. But when people are searching for something, you want to kind of go for the more relevant approach because they're actually looking for something specific. So you want your website to line up with that specific request or question. The other things that Google that are good practice is meta tags. So meta tags is basically description. So when you're searching, it doesn't do a whole lot for your actual ranking of your website, but what it does do, and when people search, and then you see the little description that comes under the address, that's what the meta description is for. Google uses that is to help educate customers about what this page is for. So if you've copied the meta description from every page and it's the same, when users are looking in that list, they're going to see the same meta description. It's not going to be relatable. So that meta description should match the content on the page. The page content, making sure that it's relevant, right? You want to make sure that it guides a user and it has relevant information. You're not just putting in a ton of keywords, because you want them to be in there. So usually what I tell people is a great example of that is when I go to a service page and you're listing a service. If I talked about web design, for example, and I say that's one of our services, I could have, pages of content. It really wouldn't be relevant to the user because they're not going to read all that content if I just talk about everything. So usually what you do is you kind of talk about the main thing. So we call this pillar content or clusters of topics. And we have one main thing that we're talking about. So that's web design. And then you can kind of branch off into subcategories from that page to give the user more information if needed. And Google will also see those branch offs. But from a user standpoint, it wouldn't be very appealing to them if I had a whole dictionary of content all on one page. You need to break that page up. You need to, categorize it to help the user understand what they're looking for. And if they're interested in that, they can branch off. So this is another place where blogs become really good because you can have supporting information. So maybe I wanted to give an example or a story about SEO. On my web design page, I can say, and here's a great example of how SEO is used. And so now I have the term SEO on that page with the content that links to the blog that talks about it in more detail if the user's interested. So by doing that, I'm creating a better visual experience and navigational experience for my customers, but also appeasing Google because I'm putting all that content there, but not all under one page. So looking at that page content and making sure it's relevant and how you want users to flow through your site. The other thing is alt tags. So alt tags are basically when you hover over an image, you'll find this more so with a computer and a mouse. You hover over it, you're going to see a little box that comes up that kind of describes what the image is. This is how Google understands what the photo on the page is about. So, and this is where it relates to what you're talking about. So you can use that to help with your SEO because the photo probably will relate to what your content is about. And you can talk about it that and use some of those phrases in that alt tag. It is also used for people who maybe have disabilities and they use like a program, for example, to read the content on the page. If they can't visually see that image, the program, the Audible reader actually goes through that page and uses that content to say, this photo is about this. So that content on those photos should be relevant again to the photo and the page. So how do companies or agencies help overall? So basically, there's a couple ways you can do it. A lot of this stuff you can do on your own. There's software out there you can use as well. It is an ongoing thing. So, you could do a technical review, just understanding, doing an audit on your website, see how it's working, make sure there's no broken links, that there's no viruses on there, doing that type of thing to get your website in check. And then you can kind of go into, keyword optimization, understanding that, a lot of people want to focus on trying to get their homepage to be the best one. But in reality, when we're talking about content, we really want some of the inside pages to have great exposure because that's where it's going to educate the user. So you can take people to your homepage, but you can't optimize your homepage for every product and service you're going to have. You have to optimize the inside pages for those specific products or services. So that way you can focus right on and target that specific phrase or keyword that you're going after. Link building, building out that strategy over time, understanding, maybe going after links. So a great example of this would be, it's not recommended to go get as many links as you want as possible. Yes, links help, but there's also the quality of links. So a good example of that is if I get Brock University to link to me versus Jane's convenience store, Google's probably going to look at the link from Brock University to be more credible. So it's going to give me a higher weight on that link than if I would have got it from Jane's Convenience. Jane's Convenience may not be a great website and it may have some issues on it. It may not be credible and it could actually think it's a spam website. So not every link you get is good. Looking at your links and seeing where the links are coming from is a better approach. So some companies, we've actually had to go back and we've had to make sure that the links in there, that some of them were listed as spam sites. We actually had to tell Google, don't link us for this site. And we actually had to submit a report to Google telling them not to link us for these sites that we don't want to be linked from them because they were actually spam sites. So there's link building strategies that way, evaluation and maintenance. So over time, like I said, as you add content, as you build your SEO and you go through that process, you're going to want to make sure your website's, kept up to date. New things are going to happen, pages are going to break, all that sort of thing. So that's how companies can help you with an SEO strategy, working and building and understanding the data, even some of the reports, and doing the work for you. But some of this stuff, like I said, you can do on your own, and that's kind of the process that you go through. So that's kind of SEO in the background.